exam prep, which is one of, sharing my screen. Can anybody see that? Is that showing up for you all? Cool. All right, so this is just the menu when you go to the website, and one of them is exam prep, which has ACC and PCC. Today we're just doing PCC. There's a free coaching log for anybody who needs, a place to log their hours. So you don't need to pay for that if you're just keeping track of all your, because ICF does require coaches to log their hours even if they don't audit. But I think, from what I understand, that they do periodically audit. They look to make sure that people are actually tracking their hours and that they're legitimate. There's role play scenarios. There's an evaluation tutor. Essentially, you upload your sessions here, and it gives you a report like a mentor would, and then you can do some like back and forth to drill parts of the session that didn't go as well as they could have. And there's this whole competency course, which we're not going to go over that. I think, that's something that you can do on your own. But it goes through every single competency and explains it in plain English and gives you examples and quizzes you on them, so you can really, deepen your understanding of the competencies. So today we are selecting the PCC/MCC exam, known also as the ICF credentialing exam, but they're changing the name of that to the PCC/MCC exam. They keep changing things. There are some changes, by the way, coming up to the exam. If you haven't heard about that, you can go on the CredentialPrep blog. There's an article that explains what is changing in the exam. Essentially, it's going to be half, it's going to be 80 questions, approximately half knowledge-based, like the ACC exam, and half scenario-based. It doesn't kick in until, I think, November, if I'm not mistaken. Or they begin to use it. It's all very confusing, to be honest. But if you're taking it soon, then you don't have to worry about that. So it'll just be scenario exam. So here, it gives you the overview, and there's the competencies and the breakdown. There's like some tips and tricks, ways to think about it based on each competency. It talks about the acronym, which we'll go over, the FOCAL and HINGE acronyms, which help you get in the right mindset for understanding the best answer and the worst answer, and some other kind of quick references, as well as a printable exam. So we'll just do practice mode. We don't need to filter by competency today. We're not going to do the full simulation of the exam. We're just going to go through one at a time. Okay, so what I think we could do here is, we'll each read it, read it to yourself and share in the chat what your best guess is for the answer. Again, we don't need to get them all right, or it doesn't matter. We're here to just discuss, what's going on in this type of question. What type of question is it? What are they testing? How do we think about it? Any questions or anything so far?
Yes, sorry, Danny. Is there any chance to make this a little bit bigger? I can't read it. It's too small, even with my glasses.
On my screen, it's big. So what I can suggest is, if you, on your computer, you can sort of hit Control plus. It depends on what kind of computer you have, but you can magnify your browser.
Yeah, no, that's it. Okay, fine. I'm very close to the screen.
Let's see. Is that better? Can everybody see
Yeah,
that?
yep, yep.
Okay. So yeah, anybody can
Perfect.
do that. I think it's Alt plus on mine, or Control plus or something. So you can magnify, make it bigger, smaller, in case anybody has that concern. Okay, so let's do it. So what are you thinking for best and worst? Christiana, when you say C or B, are you referring to best or worst? Hi, Nurhan.
Best.
Okay, C. So go ahead and throw in your best and worst.
Hello.
Anyone else? If you're not sure, just go with your gut. Okay. Well, we've got some B and D. So let's see what it says here. All right. So this question seems to be testing competency 2. And it really emphasizes that what's going on in this scenario is that the coach is having some feeling about what the client is saying, some reaction from a personal perspective. So it's about the self-management, that's what this question's about. Like, you're in a room with a client and they're saying something that personally affects you. What do you do with that? What do you do with that instinct? That's really what this is about. So if you notice any question that says something like, the coach is experiencing this and they feel this way and they feel that way, what does the coach do with that personal reaction? How do we stay client centered instead of coach centered? That's primarily the idea. Now, I mean, the wording is confusing, whatever. The point being that, you have to try to understand the wording of the way the answers are put together. But primarily the logic is that. So this is saying set aside the feeling. Okay. That is directly addressing what the problem is, the problem statement. The coach feels this. Okay, what does the coach do? You don't deal with your own feelings. I mean, you you metabolize them. You deal with your own feelings so that they don't get in the way of the client. You don't project them onto the client. So look at the wording of the competency 2. Regulating your emotions, acknowledge that the client is responsible for their own choices, awareness of self. It's all about that. What's going on with me and how do I deal with it so it doesn't get in the way of, yeah. Christiana, you have something?
Yeah. So I had a question because my sort of initial answer was right C, and then I thought, oh, I was sort of worried about that because is it that you would do C and then B sort of like sequentially, right? Like, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way this is positioned is that C is sort of the most directly answering what's going on in the scenario. Set your feelings aside and deal with that, and then check with what's going on for the client. It's not about me, it's about them. That's like the most obvious one. And B is close because it respects the client's decision, but it's a little bit of, a little bit more presumptuous, I guess. You know, it doesn't directly address this, and also it what would it mean for his longer term goals? So you sort of decide the agenda. It doesn't really specify that in the question, that that's what the client wants to discuss. You see what I'm saying? Similarly, A is asks what's holding him back. That's kind of further in that direction. It's not a bad coaching move. I mean, it's, you know, we're not talking about blowing it completely. It's just slightly iteratively less good than the other ones. And then D, you know, really stands out because it's, well, here's how I'm feeling about it. You know, that's hijacking completely. What do you all think? I mean, does that make sense? Or do you have any objections to that logic? Would you think about it differently? Suggestions? You can also type it in the chat too if you're not able to speak up.
I'll ask since nobody is. Mind you, this is my first ever look at these exams, so I'm not very experienced with this. I just submitted today my 2 sessions, so I'm really at the beginning. But thank you. Not yet. I need to pass. But when we have a situation like this, when we are struggling between 2 answers, whether being the best or the worst, so would your advice be to go back to question and think from that perspective, or is there a general advice? If possible, probably not, but
there are a lot of variables.
okay.
So you can't treat each one the same. You know, sometimes the answer is really in the scenario, you know, just understanding, oh, this is a, like, you know, the way it's framed is, here's all the stuff about how the coach feels, right? So you could pick that up by reading the scenario carefully if you didn't initially already. You know, so just go back and say, well, what are they trying to say in the scenario? What are they really testing? So make sure you don't overlook the hints that they're giving you in the scenario. And then I would say, you know, I think this is a pretty good shortcut to remind yourself of what's the lens you need to think through for a best answer and a worst answer. And then you can try to rank them. Often you can use a process of elimination, and some will be a little more obvious, and you can just, you know, remove them. And then the other ones are a little more subtle. But if you can sort of memorize the acronyms, then when it comes to the test, you can try to pass the different answers through this filter. So these, you know, for example, name her disappointment that he is staying and ask whether he is playing it safe. Does that violate any of these? And does it check off any of these?
Well, it's judgment.
Yeah, there's certainly judgment in there. That's a, you know, for the sake of being clever with letters, grades, judging, you know, same thing. But there's some kind of like, I think you're playing it safe. It's what the coach judges or grades. And in a way ignores the client too, because then it's about, I mean, when you're making it about yourself, you're paying attention to you and not to them. B and C, because they're so, I mean, A, B, and C are all relatively close to each other, is making sure you're following the client's lead. You're opening up the space, you're being curious. It's all these sort of coach leaning instincts. It's a shortcut through the competencies in a way. It's like how to think like a coach. So which one does that the most? They kind of both do, B and C. And so what's tricky here is, I would say, then you have to go to the scenario and go, well, what are they, what are they trying to imply here? They're implying this is about self-management, competency 2. Okay. Wink, So, all right. Should we move to the next one? Any other comments? Okay. Mm. Does anybody notice something similar here between this question and the last? All right, we're hearing. All right, so C and D. C and B are the correct answers. So B is worse than D. So why is that? So this is similar to the last one in some ways. Again, there's this whole thing going on with the client, and then boom, the coach feels something going on for them. So it's pretty similar. We're still dealing with that. So what does the coach do when they're experiencing that personally? Well, it looks like you heard it from the last one, right? What's going on for you? Deal with that, set it aside, focus on the client. I think the logic here is that B is worse than D because we're talking about clinical work. This is what gave it away for me. It's clinical work. What's going on with the research and the clinical work that shows da 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 da. We have completely dropped the role of a coach, and now we are giving advice about something where we don't belong. So ending the session early and rescheduling is, if we're using this thing going on over here, I mean, you're sort of hiding an agenda, you're ignoring the client, you're making a judgment call. Kind of all of the above are checked off. So D and B kind of check those off. However, B is worse because in addition, it also takes the, you jump into this like, this other lens where you don't belong. I think, but it doesn't even say that in the explanation, does it? The competency. Stay present with the client for sure. Which one is that? Do you remember? Okay, we can pull up the competencies and look at it. Let's look at the actual competencies. So are you able to see my screen with the competencies right now? Okay. So which competencies make sense for staying in the sort of coaching presence, coaching mindset, coaching role, I should say. I would argue it's maybe an ethical drift. Maybe an ethical violation. You're a coach, not a therapist. In this engagement, maybe you're both, but you have to delineate, especially for ICF coaching standards. You can't go into, here's what the research says from clinical psychology. That'd be 1.6.
Sorry, Danny, is the problem in this word clinical? Does that make it go into the therapy session?
I think that's
Or
a pretty
sharing
clear,
any research?
yeah.
Which
Well,
one?
I think it's a clear giveaway that you're lecturing. So that posture is a violation of a different competency. But the one that is 1.6 is we are taking on the role of a different profession other than coaching. It's not, so one is lecturing and what is you're lecturing about. So the act of lecturing is no good, but also the subject matter. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, if it's a pretty clear giveaway that it's saying clinical research or whatever, but it could have also said research and it still would have been no good.
Can you talk to why A doesn't seem as bad as some of the other choices?
Why A is not as bad as like B or D?
Yeah. Because for me, that feels very like I get C, acknowledging the reaction and setting it aside. So then why would I name it and make it? Why would I then ask the client if they wanted to continue if I already self-checked?
I think that A is, well, so are you asking whether it's bad or whether you're comparing it to other ones that are worse?
Not to confuse things, but B, your B that you just offered.
Okay. Yeah, so I think B just goes a little further than A because it's like not only am I going to be overrun by my emotions and go into lecturing mode, but I mean B does that, whereas A just names the personal reaction and then gives it back to the client. So I guess it's like slightly less bad. But you're still as a coach saying this resonates with me personally. So you're kind of making it about you. But B doesn't even do that. Like there's not even recognition or any amount of giving it back to the client. B is a complete takeover. Agree or disagree, or, again, that's how I'm thinking about it. So it's like a spectrum, and which one is completely coach centered and which one is completely client centered, and you kind of just, which one is further along the path of I'm totally here for the client. It's not about me, it's about them.
May I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
Okay, hi all. Okay, if we're gonna talk about B and D and both of them, let's say, are coach centered, all right, how can I say this is worse than that? Like the percentage of being the worst, because in D, like, we're neglecting at all the client, and it is coach centered because he felt the same, so he's ending the session, no excuse. And then the B, you said that he's lecturing, so ending versus lecturing, how can I balance or weigh it in order for me to choose B or D?
I think it's a great question. It's a tough call. I don't know. I think B for me is more of a ethical violation on top of the kind of hijacking the session. So for me, it sort of checks off more boxes than D does. D is I'm freaking out, I'm getting out of here. We're, shutting this down. And B is I'm freaking out, and therefore I'm going to start lecturing and cross an ethical boundary. So it sort of has more, points against it, is how I would think about it. Which one is sort of
Okay.
just a little bit worse. I think that the real exam, honestly, won't be as tricky as a question like this. I think it will have a little bit more clarity in the language. I think this is maybe the language is a little convoluted and a little tricky. So, that's why I say focus on, and we don't know exactly what the test is going to be. I think, they've had a lot of statistics and eyeballs on them, and they know they're tweaking constantly. So focus here on understanding the logic of what is best and worse and how to think about them. And I think it's probably better to train on something that's slightly more difficult or even trickier than something easier. Because then when you get to the test, you go, oh, I totally get this. I understand the logic here. They're clearly testing me on this. And I can see the kind of ranking of best to worst. All right, shall we do another? Okay. Go for it. got votes for D and A? Okay. Let's check these and see how we do. All right, so B and A. So how are we thinking about this? This scenario, it's testing a whole bunch of stuff. I think it's way beyond just these competencies. It's kind of all over the place. So the one that stands out is A, I would say, because it's kind of the less subtle of all of them, and it says, it's fully acknowledging the client, and I mean, not acknowledging, confirming, validating, sort of putting yourself and your opinion at the front. And that's always a pretty clear giveaway that that's a bad answer. Anything that's kind of coach centered instead of client centered. It's not our job as coaches to say, this sounds completely reasonable, and yeah, let me confirm, let me agree with you, let me decide for you or with you whether something is good or bad. You're grading, you're judging, you are making the interpretation. So that's a big no-no. That's obviously bad. C is asking to paste the most relevant section. So you're going straight to that solution and doing it without all of the dressing it up and saying the confirmation. So, A is worse than C. D is, a little bit of that as well. And you're kind of hedging a little bit. Don't take sides. So it's not great. You're trying to pull back a little bit from what you're doing and trying to set some parameters, but ultimately you're giving into this confirmation situation. What's really going on here is that the client's having an experience, and you as a coach have to help them think about what they're experiencing, not to do it for them. So, which is the one that puts the client back in the driver's seat? And which is the one that puts the coach in the driver's seat? I could see a little bit of that 1.6, like in the last one, because you're kind of jumping into a consultant hat. There's a little bit of, oh, show me the email, I know the answer. Let me validate that for you. This is right and wrong. This integrity question I think is interesting. I mean, you're sort of maintaining, boundaries around the job. So it's also a bit of an ethics question. The client experience, what might be most useful. So what's going on with you? You have to explore, like the client's real need is not adjudication of the thread, but exploration of her own experience. The client is experiencing something, and your job as a coach is to help that person make sense of it. What's going on for you, client? And then this might not be the greatest coach response of all time, but it's the best one available. There are better responses. And decline, what does decline mean? That comes across a little harsh, maybe. So, but maybe what decline looks like is, soft and gentle, and a way of redirecting that would be ideal. but we're not always presented with the best or the most ideal. It's the best and worst. So how do you rank these? Agree, disagree, questions?
Say something?
Yeah.
When I was reading this question, and so the client wants me to read something his personal. And the first idea came to my mind that, nope, I don't want to be the witness. So what if? What if something happens, like I'm from different mentality, from different world? What if you go to the court, or if there'll be a trial and I will be kind of a witness? No, thank you.
Mhm.
So here, I don't know, I was not sure that it's correct, but even I didn't read, like the answers. I was like, nope, I'm not going to read anything. Oh, thank you. So yeah, it was correct, but that was my logic. So I don't need this problem. And then, like it can, maybe it's my imagination, but what if it can be used against me? Nope, no, thank you. That was my logic.
Yeah, we have to stay in the role of coach. We can't go into consultant or legal advisor or witness or opinions or whatever. Certainly there's, contracts and things that you can set up to protect you with all that, but that's not what this is about. This is more on an ethical side. It's what is your role, and are you staying in that role? Yeah, and I mean, it's an interesting kind of broader conversation about how to deal with that kind of stuff in coaching, but for the purposes of the exam, coach versus client. Anything else? Any other takes? All right. Next. Okay. Hmm. Lots of plausible answers here. None of them are really bad moves. So how do we decide what's a little bit better and a little bit worse? Okay, so we like C. And all the other ones are plausible. So what makes them, what is a way of thinking about what makes one a little more client-centered, a little bit more coach-centered? Got a bunch of A's. All right, so let's check that out. Okay. So what's tripping you up when it comes to this? What was hard about it for you?
For me, it was hard because I imagined that D was the worst because he will find explanations to explain his behavior every time. And that is not in the point of focusing on the solution is making him see that he has a reason for every situation for his problem.
Hmm. So I think you're saying that as an ideal coach move, you want to get underneath the excuses and not turn it into kind of a logical cycle that you're
Yes.
validating. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe that's a valid argument from a, what is the ideal coaching move perspective. But here what we have is, we're not talking about a session that you're evaluating. We're talking about how do we rank these specific movements. So which one is a little bit more of the sort of judging and pushing the client in a particular direction that you personally believe is best as a coach. So A,
May I?
go ahead.
Okay, can you go up a little bit?
Go up, yeah.
Please. Okay, I chose B as worst. And now if I want to read it again with A, just these two, so the difference between B and A is like, because in B I'm giving the client the chance to think about it, but in A I'm just judging. Is that the difference?
Yeah, essentially. I think that's right. B is,
Like
what would you like to
he
do?
wants to do differently. It's like it is centered for the client. But what's the difference between A and D then?
A and D. So A is a little bit more pushy and says that you're assuming his goal is to follow through. So it pushes the client a little bit more in a coach-led direction. Whereas D is asking him what gets in the way, so it's a little less assuming what's inside their head.
So it sounds similar to B. And what's get in your way, what you want to do differently. So we're still, even though we're judging, but we're still giving the chance for the client to reply in his perspective. Like we're still throwing the ball to his hands, but in A we're not.
Sorry, my dogs are barking. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, exactly. A is just more presumptuous, and you can start going into the competencies to justify it, but and that can be helpful, I think, if you really if you have it all memorized and you understand which one does it a little bit more. But ultimately, it's a mindset. It's like, which one is the coach staying in the curiosity and of letting the client decide and think for themselves, and which one is just slightly more judgmental, slightly more deciding for the client. I mean, all of the questions really come down to that. Aside from maybe some of the ethical ones, which maybe are like a little more technical, I guess. But other than ethics, I think most of them are just which one leans this way and which one leans that way. Do you see that?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
You don't sound convinced.
It's not convincing. It's about I don't know. I just want to make it right for once. Is it the time? Is it the language that we need to think about it more? I don't know.
Okay, so in this one, ask what it would take for him to follow through. Well, what do you notice about the language of A?
Now I noticed that it's like I'm asking you a question, you have to say yes and no, or you give me this answer, you don't have the time to think about it. It's like I don't give you the opportunity to say, coach, you might be right, you might be wrong. But in the others, they are.
And in D, there is. Yeah.
Ask him what gets in the, yeah, so it's like, give me a reason why this is happening. So now the client's thinking about why it's happening every time. But in A, it's not. It's like, what's the reason why you're not following through? It's like being very judgmental, very direct question.
Mm. So yeah, D is pretty judgmental. What gets in the way? You know, and that's why it's definitely not the best answer.
Yeah.
I think the difference is that A is judgmental, but it also presumes to know the client's agenda. And we always have to partner with the client. If you're not partnering, I mean, I think that's you know, in terms of the coaching mindset, being client-centered in coaching means partnering with them. So whenever you decide on or you're making assumptions about what the person's goal is, you're not really partnering. You're not saying, what's your goal and what do you want out of this? You're saying, I'm assuming that this is the direction you want. So that's not a move in partnership. What gets in the way is a challenge, and yeah, it's not ideal. I agree. It's a bit judgmental, you know, because you're saying something's wrong with you. You know, what's your problem, kind of thing. But you're letting them decide what their agenda is, essentially. You know, you're not really challenging or deciding for them what gets in the way. I think that's just the distinction.
Can you move a bit down to see what it written at the worst answer?
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
You see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is like really analyzing the word and the words in the scenario. Basically, what that means is you're interpreting, you're forming opinions. You're making interpretations. You are now the mind reading expert, and attributes the problem to the client's insufficiency rather than opening the pattern for exploration. D is maybe a little more open. I see. D opens a genuine inquiry into the obstacles, even if it is a bit judgmental. Further thoughts, questions, anything else standing out? Okay. All right. I don't think we have time for another. I don't think we have time for one more. So I'm gonna stop it there and bring it back just to see if any of you have thoughts or questions, anything else you'd want to share. I know that this can be tricky, and like I said, I think that these questions that we've looked at are potentially more confusing than the real test will be. And I also think that that's probably, it can be useful because it just pushes you to think critically about, what's this really testing? You know, what are the subtle distinctions that make something a little better, a little worse as an ICF coach? But the feedback I've gotten is that yeah, that the real test is just slightly more clear on what exactly is the distinction between each one. But then other people say it's very subtle and, have a really hard time with it. So it's pretty subjective experience. Yeah.
Can I ask something? So
Yeah, sure.
the things that we were just looking at, who wrote it? Is this something you wrote or
I wrote it.
just
I used AI to come up with the
okay,
scenarios and the questions.
okay, okay.
But I've gone back and forth, I mean, 100 times on all of these questions to change them and to make them better. So
Okay, okay. Thank
I
you.
didn't just generate them and then say, okay, bye bye.
Mhm.
I've gone through them over and over and over and over. So
Thank you. Yeah.
sure. Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, it would have taken me a year to write each one of these independently.
Oh,
I tried
okay.
actually at the beginning. I was like, oh, this will be easy. I'll just, tell AI to do it for me. It was a disaster. It's such a disaster. They didn't, it didn't understand the competencies. It like none of it made any sense. It contradicted itself. It like clearly violated competence. So, here they're tricky, but they do honor the essence of the competency and what it really means to think in a coaching mindset.
Mhm. Thank you.
So if you're any other comments before we
Okay.
questions?
It's my actually third time I'm here. Yeah, most of the time, unfortunately, I work on Fridays. That's why I'm sitting kind of like quietly in the corner with no camera. So I apologize for that. So, but I really appreciate everything you're doing for us because I think it's really very helpful. And sometimes, like me personally, I can speak only for myself that sometimes I'm like, okay, so I'm the Superman, I know everything. You read the question and like, yes, this is the correct answer. And then you see the like the correct answer, like, okay, maybe I'm dumb. So, and so it's still kind of like, um, the only limit is the sky. And I know that when people say that, like, oh, I'm a professional, for me personally, it's kind of like it's the beginning of the end. And again, like, I think that these sessions, they're really, really, for me personally, very helpful. And sometimes even when I'm listening to you guys and to you, Danny, that you explained everything, some of the things are more, like clearer for me personally. And again, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And next time, if you're going to do it again, so even if I'm at work, yeah, without camera, but I will be with you guys because it's really, really helpful. I appreciate it. Thank you so
Glad to
much.
hear it. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll do it again. I'll send out an email. I'll put it in the Facebook groups, and if you're not on either of those, then just get in touch and I'll let you know. All right. And here, if you have questions, if you're going through anything and you're like, this doesn't make sense, or your writing sucks, or whatever you want to say, please reach out and let me know. All right. Until then, have a wonderful weekend. Take care.